All right. Hello and welcome to the Elliot Omanson Show with Elliot Omanson. It is, what day is it? The 20th, 21st? I don't know. It's some day at which Trump went and yapped at a bunch of flaming leftist Euro globalists in Davos. So what would that be? The 20th? Yeah, 20th. All right. And I think we're going to do a whole video on that because what a speech. But in the meantime, I want to talk about Minnesota fraud. Not the kind of fraud you're probably going to think, though. But it might start off that way. Fantastic article, an exceptional piece of journalism in CBS, on CBS News, CBSnews.com. A bit of a lengthy title. Michael Kaplan. The title is Aimee Bock. That's Aimee with an A-I-M and two E's. I'll let you sort out the order. Aimee Bock, mastermind of Minnesota's biggest fraud scheme, says, I wish I could go back and do things differently. Most people who get arrested generally feel that way. But let's look at the opening paragraph. The Trump administration was justified in its ongoing immigration. Oh, let me correct myself. The Trump administration has justified its ongoing immigration crackdown in Minnesota by citing a need to curb fraud and pointing to a widening scandal involving members of the Somali American community. Yet prosecutors say the mastermind of the state's biggest fraud scheme to date was not Somali, but a white woman, 45-year-old Aimee Bock. So, just think that over. What's the message of that paragraph, right? It's not the Somalis. It's actually white women. Now, I think the irony here is pretty wild because you can assure there's another label missing from white woman, and that would be a liberal white woman. And that's just delicious to me. But do you think anything in that paragraph, do you think the point of that paragraph, do you think the messaging is actually true? See, I think this entire article is pretty much indicative of a much larger case of fraud, and that's journalistic fraud. And there's countless, endless examples of it. Sometimes I feel like we could run a channel literally doing nothing but taking articles from MSNBC and CNN and CBS and ABC and just tearing them apart because it's too easy. What I really find amazing, and maybe they do this to cover their ass, is they actually will put the truth into the article. 5, 6, 7 paragraphs down. Maybe they're hoping nobody ever gets that far. Maybe they feel it gives them rationale to excuse the way in which they framed the narrative in the beginning. I'm not 100% sure why. But let's go to the truth of it. And in this one, I'll give them credit. We don't got to go that far. 1, 2, 3. So it's the 4th paragraph. And you got to go, if you're on your phone, you got to go below an ad break. So far, prosecutors have charged 78 defendants connected to Feeding Our Future with more than 60 pleading guilty or having been convicted at trial. Nearly all are East African or of Somali descent, except for Aimee Bock. It seems to me their 4th paragraph completely contradicts the opening paragraph. But they didn't cover journalism in my 4 days of community college, so what would I know? Now, we might just cut this and end this there. I could go on and talk a little bit about more things, right? I don't really know what somebody's nationality has to do with fraud. Or at least I would say I had it until I read a really incredible book called The Weirdest People. And in the title, the word weird is an acronym for Western Educated, Industrialized, Rich, and Democratic. And the point of the book is just about how literacy and literacy rates in nations rewires neural pathways among its citizens, and it has wide-ranging effects that allow a Western educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic nation to exist. One of the things that this book talks about is the UN fraud rankings. I didn't even know that the UN ranked such things, but they actually rank all the countries on Earth on a global scale of where the most fraud occurs. Anybody want to take a guess as to which countries are the highest fraud-ridden countries in the world? And if you guessed Africa, you'd be right. Somalia and Chad. I think Chad's the number 1 most fraud-riddled nation on the planet. Somali's pretty close. Nathaniel will fact check me and put a little blurb. Yeah. So you could spin off of this bullshit, fraudulent journalistic article published by the fraudulent CBS News to get into some more in-depth conversations, right? You know, how should immigration policy be formed? Should you open up your borders to people from nations that consistently prove themselves unable to function without fraud? In the book, The Weirdest People, they actually had a unique opportunity to study fraud. And it was in the 90s when the UN, the United States, stripped members of the UN from being able to get away with parking tickets. Up until the early 90s, the UN had amassed millions in unpaid parking tickets in New York. And New York changed their laws, or the government changed their laws, to enable New York to hold these foreign diplomats accountable for their parking tickets. Anybody want to guess who still continued to not pay their parking tickets and park illegally? If you guess people from Africa, you're right. All right. Again, it was the country's highest on the UN's fraud rankings. There was like very little they could do to curb it. When it is so ingrained into your culture, should you really be opening up your borders to masses of these people, right? And I'm not saying none of them, because I do believe in the whole idea of conformity and the melting pot and assimilation. I think the problem is when you allow too many people in, they cluster together and they fail to assimilate and merge and melt and conform. And that's where I think you end up with problems, right? If you look at any of the statistics around the Somali population in Minnesota, they're clearly not assimilating. When you look at what percentage of them are all still on welfare and all still having all these issues and all these things, like they've come to America, they're not reaping the benefits of being in America, unless you count welfare as a benefit. And so I just think it's just indicative of having brought too many over, allowing them to cluster together in a single community, band together. Maybe they would have been better off if we had dispersed them throughout the country, so they'd be forced into assimilating within the communities. I don't know. I'm not against people from all these different countries coming over. I'm just against them being able to come over and not integrate into the American system. So anyways, that's way off topic. My main point was just that I just love how full of shit the CBS article is. So they're trying to pin it on a white woman, and then they talk about 60 other people, all of which were Somali and East African. But hey, they got a white woman. They got their Derek Chauvin. They got their white woman to pin it on and hang her for the sins of the state. So I highly suggest reading the article too, going deeper into it, because it's hard to read this article and actually think she's anything other than a patsy. It says the government confiscated $5 million. Well, where was the $5 million? Was it like the Black Lives Matter activists that had bought millions in homes outside the United States with the donation money? No. The $5 million was all right where it was supposed to be, in the nonprofits' bank accounts. Was she living in a lavish home that she spent millions on? No. She was living in the same home she lived in for decades. Did they confiscate Lambos, Rollses, Benzes, Rolex? No. They got two pairs of earrings, a watch, and like a bracelet. So if this woman was defrauding, was the head of the largest fraud, $250 million, where is it? Where was it? Show me how she was benefiting from it all. Just saying. But I also love, if you read it, she literally set herself up for this. She's a liberal white woman who literally sued the state of Minnesota to force them to approve the applications for these Somali food scams faster. Like, she did that. I don't know, man. It's delicious. The whole article is delicious. Hopefully we post a link to it and you can read it yourself. This is Elliot signing off.